I just mean that it's no longer 1937, and we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
she's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's not going to be dreaming about true love. She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be. So weird.
There is a Disney movie scheduled to be out in 2024 inspired by the story of Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. I have to say inspired by because according to the actresses that are starring in the movie, this movie is going to be quite different from the original story. The movie is not out yet, however there's already a lot of talk about what elements will and won't be in this film.
When we came to reimagining the actual role of Snow White, it became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just and who can become a fantastic leader. And the reality is, Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
This is only August 2023, and therefore this is more of a pre-adaptation look. A lot of people are probably familiar with the 1937 animated film Snow White and the Seven Dwarves, and therefore this live-action movie will invariably be compared to that, but the story is much older than that. Although stories like Snow White and the Seven Dwarves have variation through different cultures, when people think of the story, it is usually the Brother Grimm's version. The Brothers Grimm first published the tale in the early 1800s. I have a pretty big collection of books myself, and I happen to own a book on Grimm's Complete Fairy Tales, which I think was published in the 1970s. It includes hundreds of stories, including Snow White and the Seven Dwarves. That is the book that I want to use as a reference. Actress Rachel Zegler has a lot to say on this upcoming film.
We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story. One of those things that I think everyone's going to have their assumptions about what it's actually going to be, but it's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful. And whether or not she finds love along the way is anybody's guess.
Why is she so opposed to love? Most people I know like love. Has our society become so cynical that people do not appreciate love anymore? Movies like The Princess Bride was founded on the idea that love between people can be a strong motivation factor and bring out the best in people.
That day she was amazed to discover that when he was saying "as you wish," what he meant was, "I love you." And even more amazing was the day she realized she truly loved him back.
You're alive. If you want, I can fly.
Death cannot stop true love. All it can do is delay it for a while.
Whether it is romantic love between two consenting adults or between a grandfather and his grandson, love is an emotion that ties people together and supports strong relationships.
Grandpa? Maybe you could come over and read it again to me tomorrow.
As you wish.
Why is Rachel Zegler so opposed to this and saying that not having love in their movie is a good thing? Maybe this is all just what the actress is saying, but co-star Gal Gadot also seems to be agreeing that what Rachel says about the movie is correct. But I'm not here to talk about the politics of the film. I want to look at this as an adaptation. The 2024 movie is an adaptation of the 1937 animated movie, but let's compare the points to the original Grimm story. Here are some of the story elements that make up the upcoming Snow White movie according to Rachel and Gal.
She's dreaming about becoming the leader she knows she can be, and the leader that her late father told her that she could be. It became about the fairest of them all, meaning who is the most just, and who can become a fantastic leader.
1. The story is about Snow White learning about leadership. When the queen decides to have Snow White murdered because she was more fair, this is about justice and who can become a fantastic leader, not looks. The story is about how Snow White must learn lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into the power over a kingdom. Snow White will strive to become a leader, as that was what her father impressed upon her.
And we absolutely wrote a Snow White that
she's not going to be saved by the prince.
She's not going to be saved by the prince.
Also, the fact that she's not going to be saved by the prince, and she's the proactive one, and she's the one who set the terms.
2. Snow White will not be saved by a prince. She is the proactive one who sets the terms.
And she's not going to be dreaming about true love. We have a different approach to what I'm sure a lot of people will assume is a love story just because we cast a guy in the movie. all of Andrew's scenes could get cut. Who knows? It's really not about the love story at all, which is really, really wonderful.
3. It is not a love story. Snow White is not dreaming about true love, she's dreaming about being a leader. It is not about the love story at all, and all the scenes involving the prince character could get cut out. The movie will be a different approach to a love story.
It's an inner journey that she goes on to find her true self, and she meets a lot of people along the way that make the journey really incredible. Snow White has to learn a lot of lessons about coming into her own power before she can come into power over a kingdom.
And lastly, 4. It is a story about an inner journey that Snow White goes on to find her true self. Okay, let's crack this book open. Page 330. Editor Marco here. Please note that while I'm talking about the story from the book, I'm using screenshots from the animated movie as a visual reference. The original story is about a young woman named Snow White, named thusly because her skin was as white as snow, her lips as red as blood, and her hair as black as an embroidery frame. Her stepmother, the Queen, was obsessed with beauty, and although very beautiful herself, was jealous because some magic mirror said that Snow White was fairer. Although I think that some talking mirror is a poor way of determining attractiveness because beauty is objective, that is what happened in the original story. The Queen orders a huntsman to murder Snow White, but he instead lets her go free in the woods and brings back a heart from a boar telling the Queen that Snow White is dead. Snow White encounters a dwelling of 7 dwarves that make a living by mining. She agrees to do household chores in return for being able to stay in their house. Maybe she should have traveled some more, checked out other options before settling down. But this is what happens in the original story. Twice, the Queen disguises herself in order to trick Snow White into letting her in the house. While disguised, the Queen tries to murder Snow White, first by suffocating her by tying her up in lace, then by combing her hair with a poison comb. Each time the Queen left Snow White for dead and left the area, Snow White was then saved by the dwarves. Maybe the Queen should have made sure her quarry was dead before leaving. After all, mostly dead is slightly alive.
Mostly dead is slightly alive.
But this is what happened in the original story. Then, 3rd time's a charm. The Queen returns to the house in a 3rd disguise and tricks Snow White into eating a poisoned apple, and she dies. Like, dead. Like, she was so dead, the dwarves literally cried for 3 days. Dead. The dwarves placed her corpse in a coffin made of glass, and for some reason she did not decompose. For a long time, Snow White's body laid in a glass coffin and looked exactly the same as when she died. And like, a long time passed. 95% of the way into the story, the nameless prince is introduced. Yeah, he's just referred to as a king's son. He was so smitten by Snow White's beauty that he takes away the glass coffin. Then, get this, while the coffin was being carried, one of the carriers stumbles over a bush, and this shakes the bit of poison apple out of Snow White's throat, and she gets resurrected. Wait, what? She did not actually die by swallowing the poison apple, instead the piece just had to be lodged in her throat to kill her instantly. But when the piece of apple came out of her throat, she returned from the dead. This story is weird.
Weird.
But that is what happened in the original story. Then the prince says, "Hey, I live in a castle, you'll be my bride." Snow White says, "Okie dokie," and they get married. What happened to the Queen that put a hit on her stepdaughter and then tried to murder her twice and finally succeeded? Sort of. She was made to wear red-hot iron shoes and dance until she fell down dead. The Grimm stories did not mess around. You should see what happened to the stepsisters in the Cinderella story. So how accurate are the claims of Rachel Zegler and Gal Gadot compared to the original story? The original story says nothing about leadership or Snow White's father impressing upon her to be a leader or running a kingdom or anything like that. No, the talk about who was fair was all about physical beauty, not about who was more just. It was not a story about Snow White finding her true self, or whatever that means. The story is pretty straightforward. A woman attempts to murder her stepdaughter who is better looking. The first 2 attempts are thwarted by the young woman's friends, but the 3rd try succeeds. The young woman is then resurrected by some freak incident, and she marries some dude she just met. However, they were pretty much correct about the love story though. The original story did not really have one. The prince had Snow White's corpse carried away because she looked pretty, and when she rose from the dead, they got married. There was no story about Snow White dreaming about a prince, or dreaming about love, or anything like that. The animated movie took that tiny part of the original story and expanded upon it, which quite frankly, I think was a good choice. The whole romance idea is something that a lot of people like. As I said before, people like love stories.
And so it's just a really incredible story for, I think, young people everywhere to see themselves in.
Sure, you may think you have an incredible story, but if the story of the movie is about a young woman who dreams about being a leader and goes on a journey to find herself, that is not the Snow White story. Stop comparing your movie to the 1937 animated movie. You're just making up some new story. So, what are your thoughts on the upcoming live-action Snow White movie? Let us know in the comments. Are you interested in seeing how closely other Disney movies are to the original Grimm stories, such as The Frog Prince, Cinderella, Rapunzel, Sleeping Beauty? Let me know. Maybe I might make a video on those in the future. But that is all I have for this tale. Take care, everyone.